digging in, and they could turn it quite easily.
Finally, the workers might also cover the ground with small stones or gravel, which act like ball bearings, so that the huge blocks can roll along. This huge slab of granite at Machu Picchu, abandoned by Inca workmen, gives us a snapshot of the work in progress. These techniques work well for smaller stones, but as evidence from Egypt and the statues of Easter Island suggests, moving larger stones requires the use of other techniques.
Most people think rollers were used routinely to move big stones in antiquity. Rollers are very hard to use in the field. They're impossible to use going uphill and downhill. The problem is you have too little friction. You can't control the stone. You're fighting the stone's tendency to roll around all the time.
And in the tight workspace on the mountain ridge, this could have proved fatal. There wasn't enough space to have dozens of men pulling ropes, especially when placing stones on the lip of the cliff. This forced the Inca crew to find ways to reduce the number of workers needed to move large stones up and down slopes.
What you really want is what we call sleepers, which is like rollers, but they're fixed. They can't roll. And across that, you can move a sled quite easily.
Vince Lee believes he knows how the Inca moved the stones around the site. He says they may have used ladders as sleds.
Lie this ladder on the ground. The only difference between this ladder and the one in your garage is that the rungs stick out beyond the uprights on the sides. You lay this on the ground, then you take a second one, put it on top of the first one, and you put your stone on top of the second ladder. Now with levers, you can apply force between the outriggers of the sliding sled that's carrying the stone, and the ladder that's stuck to the ground by gravity. The Egyptians did this routinely, and I think the Incas did too in close quarters.
This technique would have allowed the Inca to move stones over the steep, rough terrain.
And it also means that you don't have a fancy road, you just have two ladders. You just keep leapfrogging one ladder in front of the other, and you can go all over the countryside.
Using clever techniques, the Inca found ways of moving stones across the difficult site. But the job would depend on manpower. Recruiting such an enormous workforce might seem a daunting prospect. But for the Inca emperor, this challenge was easily met. And it was met through taxation. Inca subjects could pay off the taxes they owed to the empire by providing physical labor. Overseers assembled huge work crews, and these citizen workers had vast advantages over slave labor.
You know, you can make slaves go to work, but you can't make them do a good job. All you can make them do is look busy all day long. And the workers that did this Inca stuff took the time to do it right, and we think that's probably because they had some stake in the results. They were proud of what they were doing as opposed to simply being forced to do it by overlords.
Despite the care they'd taken, the Inca builders were about to discover that it doesn't take much to undo weeks of work. In this land of heavy rains and unstable slopes, one tiny mistake can bring everything crashing down. Perched on a precarious mountain ridge, Machu Picchu's engineers were engaged in a constant battle with gravity. The terraces they had so carefully constructed sculpted the mountainside, supporting the city, anchoring it to the landscape. But today, in the lower terraces, a disruption can be seen in the pattern. Something knocked the terrace walls out of alignment. Others disappeared under an earthen blanket. Higher up, the steep slope has now shaken off the soil that once cloaked it. This was a landslide. The earth has given away along a natural fault line, damaging the terraces. Believed to be a slow but destructive event, it stretches 140 meters down the hillside. But Pachacuti's work crews adapted as always, assessing the cause, implementing a plan, and repairing the damage. Their solution is familiar to modern-day engineers, but 500 years ago, it was revolutionary. Pachacuti's men cut a drainage channel above the disrupted terraces to redirect surface water and prevent further damage. They couldn't afford to take any chances. If the heavy rains of the region had soaked into the foundations, the waterlogged substructure may have slid away with catastrophic results. So, building by building, wall by wall, the engineers punctuated the site with drainage outlets and downspouts, 130 in all. In heavy rains, these channels diverted water into a large storm sewer that safely emptied into the rainforest below.
One thing you never will see in Machu Picchu is a pool of water standing on the surface. Yeah, and as much as it rains, and sometimes it rains really hard here, that's always draining away. You never see it.
Once the land was cleared and these firm foundations were laid out, Pachacuti's stonemasons could build the homes, plazas, and temples that would make up the site. As always, they worked with nature, sculpting it, so that here the buildings flowed gracefully across the mountaintop.
Most cultures sort of cut the top off. We certainly do, for example, in our culture, just cut the top off and put a building on top. But somehow the Incas managed to celebrate the natural contour of the land and the natural amenities of the land and enhance them with their structures rather than work contrary to them. Very unusual and beautifully done.
There were temples for worship, houses for living, bathing areas, and a grand plaza for gatherings and games. Today, only the rock walls remain. Thatched roofs once sat on these structures and shed the heavy rains, but that's not all they had to withstand.
In this part of the world, you can get very strong winds sometimes in the Andes, and air flows over the top of the roof like air flowing over the top of a wing of an aircraft, and it gives lift underneath, and it can just lift the roof straight off.
So the roofs needed to be lashed firmly to the structure, but how? The Inca had strong rope, but little else. As always, they found their solution in stone.
If you look at the end of the building here, you can see all these stone pegs. Then if you follow the line of the gable end, you can see these ring stones set into the gable end. This was part of the system for securing the roof beams and the roof materials.
The roof pegs for each of the 170 structures that make up the urban section of Machu Picchu were built and assembled on site. But the truly remarkable craftsmanship is in these features: windows and doors framed out of rock. These distinctive trapezoidal shapes of the rocks and door and window frames take us back to the height of Inca cultural power. Each one was carved and placed by highly skilled stonemasons. The masons joined the stones without using cement or mortar. Yet the seams are so tight, they dazzle modern-day architects.
You often hear people say, oh, you can't get a knife blade in the joint. You can't get anything in the joint in some of these places. The stone just simply changes color a little as it goes across the joint. It is miraculous.
For Pachacuti's craftsmen to achieve such quality without iron tools seems impossible. Yet the stones they crafted fit together precisely. Researchers have found vital clues to the Inca technique in these large granite chunks left unfinished at Machu Picchu. Smooth pockmarks in their surface indicate the use of smaller stones, called hammer stones, to shape the rock. Inca stoneworkers pounded the surface of the granite with these rounded stones obtained from riverbeds until they had a smooth surface covered in dust. As the next stone was laid, the stonemason used imprints in the dust as a guide to areas needing further work. Using progressively smaller hammer stones, the masons achieved a closer and closer fit until the facing top and bottom surfaces were a perfect match. This method created a unique feature of Inca architecture.
You'll never find a straight line or a right angle corner in an Inca building unless it's done by accident. You will never find that. You will see sites which superficially appear to be sort of squared off stones, but if you study them carefully, they aren't square at all. They're just slightly off square. And this is very, very difficult to do. As long ago as the ancient Egyptians, people discovered that the easy way to put two big stones together was to flatten off the sides and then put the two flat sides together. You'll never see that in an Inca building.
How did the Inca manage to get these irregular shaped stones to match up so perfectly? Once again, the stones themselves provide the clues. These walls have settled slightly and pulled the stones apart.
What they've done here is they've made a perfect join between each stone all the way to the back, the whole depth of the stone. And not only that, but it's one face is concave and the other is convex. So they're perfectly fitted together in a very difficult way to accomplish.
The same perfect fit can be found all over the site, both in smaller stones and in the larger ones. They appear to have been created by the same method of fitting, removing, and refitting, regardless of size.
So the question is, how did they achieve that fit?
Vince Lee thinks he may have the answer. It's called scribing, a technique sometimes used by log cabin builders to fit irregular log surfaces together. At Machu Picchu, the stonemasons transferred the shape of one stone to its mate using a protractor to mirror the edge of one surface. They marked it and shaped it to fit the opposite stone.
Then it's not important that either surface is flat. All we know is that they will be perfect matches for each other, and then we can one time slide the stones together and they'll have to fit.
The builders set row upon row of precisely fitted stones against each other in near perfect alignment. Pachacuti's masons also carefully alternated the stones, placing them vertically and horizontally to spread the load evenly throughout the temple. On top of the building, the perfect alignment of the finely fitted huge blocks seems to defy gravity. These odd, stony projections provide the clues to its construction. To access the top and bottom portions of the rocks, they used a system of levers. This is how it works. Stone carvers carved a groove into one side of the granite block. Laborers used a wooden post to lever the block up on an angle, allowing scribers to shape the top and bottom sides of the block with hammer stones. This created a perfect fit into the wall.
That requires propping the stone up in the air, which people are spooked by with some good reason. But I've done it, and it works.
The careful efforts of Pachacuti's stonemasons are evident all over the finest structures at Machu Picchu. At the top of a staircase and fountain, opposite a palace, stands the city's crown jewel, a uniquely shaped building. Extra care has been put into this particular structure. The building's walls are especially unusual. They follow the curve of the bedrock, creating a semicircle. The centerpiece of this structure is this, a carved stone platform, positioned to play off light in mysterious ways. So what was this for? At the winter solstice, It aligns perfectly with the window.